beloved of those Jesus stories. And it's an odd sort of little story if you think about it. So often what we do is we use that story as a way to say, see, our guy is the magic guy, so you should be with us. And I think that that's problematic, because I don't think that that was the intended use of that story. It seems to me that what the story is portraying is an alternative worldview that Jesus is making available not only to the people in first century Palestine, but to people all along, to include ourselves. If we think about the context that these events are portrayed in, Jesus has just come from his hometown, where he's been run out of town. Part of the reason that he was run out of town is that, let's just say that there were social obstacles that were in the way of his teachings being accepted. There seems to have been some sort of a caste system in which someone who was a mere tekton, a lower than a peasant, because peasants probably had land that they owned and worked. Jesus, if in fact he was a carpenter, would have been probably a non-land owner, a tekton who was just a guy, a working stiff, the poorest of the poor. Well, he was in better shape than the lepers, but not much more. And so when he stands up in the temple and begins to preach, well, that didn't work. Not only were they murmuring, but eventually they were going to throw him off a cliff. That's one part of the context that he's in. The ways in which we categorize one another, we stigmatize one another, we limit one another in our ability to express revelation, spiritual experience. No, you haven't been to seminary. You shouldn't be talking in public about these spiritual things. Come on. Of course, Jesus had never been to seminary either, so he had the same reaction. The other part is, if you think about immediate events right around this, he's learning of the execution of John the Baptist. This is the way in which that sort of imperial mentality, imperial oppression, has hit very close to home for Jesus. John was his initial mentor, you might say. He was the one who baptized him. He was the one who was there when that experience of revealing, at least that initial experience of revealing his ministry to him, and then sending him out into the wilderness. That imperial oppression in which human beings, as well as everything of our needs, become commodities. All empires are based on the commodification, you might say. I'm not sure that's a word, but if it is, what I'm referring to. The commodification of both people and things, people and needs, for the benefit of the few. And that's what the Roman Empire was about. They just didn't need more real estate. They needed client states to provide certain members of the upper crust in their culture with great wealth. And And so they would use their magnificent army to go out on these extended business trips. Now we just send the governor. The governor goes out, takes some cronies to foreign countries to meet with cronies there to create business ties. In the Roman Empire, they sent the army. And the army would conquer the little armies in these various and sundry places, but then they would set up a puppet government, puppet religious institutions, and then they would milk those little countries for everything they could get from it. Thus is the nature of empire. An empire is about everything being a commodity, something for a few to get rich off of. And that's the context in which Jesus' ministry is taking place. There is this built-in institutional limitations and caste systems and then imperial oppression and commodification of people. The alternative that Jesus is offering them seems rather simple on the surface. His friends come to him, they say, you know, we hadn't planned on all these people showing up. This was supposed to be some downtime, right? We weren't prepared for all these folks. Here they are. There's 5,000 men plus all the women and children. It's the end of the day, and we're out here beyond nowhere. You want us to run them off, send them to town? They can stop off at the 7-Eleven. They can get a Slurpee, can of Vienna sausage. Jesus says, no, you feed them. And of course, what's the response? We've only got the loaves and the fishes. So then what happens is one of two tremendous miracles. Either somehow through Jesus' power, in his blessing of this food, it becomes all but limitless. That's one possibility. The other possibility, and maybe the greater miracle, is that by this expression of generosity, everybody there reaches into their bags and starts pulling out food and sharing it with those around them. I'm not sure which, quite honestly, I find the more plausible. That somehow the food was not a commodity. It was a simple human need. And that the world as Jesus saw it, and the worldview that he's trying to get us to see, is that we live in a world of abundance. There's plenty for everybody. And I think then, but what about all this poverty? What about the hunger? What about the homelessness? Well, I recently heard that there are more empty housing units in this country than there are homeless people. There should be no one living outside that doesn't want to be there. We have plenty of housing. But what's in the way? We don't have a housing problem, we have a delivery system problem. We have a heart problem. We have a commodity problem. Same with food. Every year, food rots in the silos. There's food going to waste everywhere. There are people that find that going to a dumpster behind a restaurant is their best opportunity to get a decent meal. There's plenty of food, but we've got this delivery problem and this heart condition. Nobody should go hungry. We've got this problem with health care. People don't have access to health care. But there's plenty of health care available. But we've got a problem with the delivery system. We've got health care as a commodity, and food as a commodity, and housing as a commodity. Basic human needs have been turned into commodities to get rich off of. And as a result, look around. And this is not just a 21st century problem. But I think it becomes more acute in modern, Western, so-called developed countries like our own, where everything is for sale. It's all about the God Almighty dollar. And we will say anything and do anything to defend that. And we will send our armies, and we will do whatever it takes to keep the flow of money going. And if that includes having thousands on the streets, sleeping under bridges, if that includes having people eating out of dumpsters, if that includes having people going bankrupt just to provide basic health care, they should have managed their money better. And what Jesus offered to those folks out there in that wilderness situation, no questions asked. He didn't ask for their immigration status. He didn't ask to see their medical card. He didn't ask to see their food stamp card. He just said, feed them. It seems crazy. It makes us want to say, yeah, but in the real world, but the world that we call real is the one of our creation. We have set up these systems that make everything a commodity. We have done that, and we support that, and we continue to do that as if it was some sort of law of nature. We're not talking about gravity here. We're not talking about the speed of light. We're talking about changeable systems. We're talking about how intelligent people who created these could also create others. Smarter people than me can figure these things out. There has to be something that happens first, though. Before we can change our minds, we have to change our hearts. We have to begin to look at basic human needs as something else. As not just a means to the good life, whatever we think that means, but as a basic human